My whole life, I was told that my head is in the clouds, that I think too big. It turns out, the problem wasn't that I was thinking too big. The problem was that I wasn't thinking big enough. Yo, it's the J to the O, Ethan, the Joker. This message is for anybody who loves music, but not the current state of the music industry, and wants to be part of something revolutionary. I'm gonna tell you my story, how it became way bigger than just me, and all about the exciting new trail we're getting ready to blaze. Now, before we go any further, let me just say, whether you've been rocking with me for 5 minutes or 20 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, as a classically trained musician who's been making his living in the underground rap world for the last 14 years, I've always lived in sort of a professional and creative tension. One side of me making elaborate compositions with lush, textured soundscapes and emotional depth, like big pop songs you would hear in a movie soundtrack. And the other side of me trapped in the dark, gritty underground rap world, where a lot of fans just want to hear hard bars and dope beats. Still, my best-selling album to date is Trail of Destruction, which is all super aggressive battle rap. But I've always been an underground battle rapper with vast creative musical visions. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the underground, and I always will. I just didn't want to be pigeonholed into only making that kind of music. That's why my first album, Welcome to the Show, had both rap songs and singing tracks. That's also why I began doing music as a character in a fantasy narrative universe I created called The Joker's Legacy. My logic was, if I made the world, then I made the rules, and people had to step onto my playing field to experience my art. And a Joker's wild, after all. Being unpredictable is foundational to the very concept. So even in the underground, that's how I sold myself, as the Joker of the Joker's Legacy. And it's been a great time, but it's always been small scale, and I've always felt that I was here for something more. Not because I want to be rich and famous, but rather because I always knew deep down that the music and the fans deserved something more, something bigger, better. And I knew it was out there to be discovered and created. I stopped doing live shows in 2008 because I understood that in order for fans to get the live full-scale experience of some of the giant songs that I make, I would need to create a demand that would justify a commensurately huge budget and production. Most artists simply shrink their ambitions and just tour small venues, hoping to build up the demand over time until they can eventually do the big ones they really want. But that option simply didn't work for me. I had already played small bars with terrible sound systems for years, and saw how slow, unfruitful, and laborious that approach was. It felt disrespectful, both to the art I created and to the fans who consumed it. So after coming out with my official debut album, Welcome to the Show, in 2009, I told myself I wouldn't tour again until I could do it right. Now, this deliberate rejection of the traditional approach cost me a lot. Since independent artists usually make most of their money from touring, as I built my brand, I was forfeiting all the income that would have been rolling in from shows, appearances, meet and greets, and merchandise. And that required me to quadruple my efforts outside of live shows to continue surviving, building, and pushing my vision forward. Additionally, I was living in Phoenix, where I grew up, but I knew that to get where I really wanted to be, I had to be at the very heart of the entertainment industry. Also, in 2012, I'd gotten married to an actress. So a couple years later, in 2014, against the advice of my family and my friends, and among the fake-smiled, silent indignation of most of my peers, I moved to Los Angeles. There, I began to seek out those exceptional humans who had done marvelous and massive things in entertainment. They, I believed, would appreciate and understand my over-the-top thinking. Those were the Eagles, and I was determined to fly with them, or die trying. As soon as I got to LA, which, by the way, was about 4 or 5 times the cost of living in Phoenix at the time, I began working my ass off doing anything and everything I could to survive, including collaborations, mixing and mastering, and music videos for other artists. In this process, though, I got the opportunity to connect with and work with some of the biggest names in music, including Yellow Wolf, Dr. Dre, B.O.B., Kevin Gates, Glasses Malone, Kendrick Lamar, Too Short, R.A. the Rugged Man, and many more. I became a student of the way the real entertainment industry works. It wasn't enough just to be a successful independent artist. My songs to me were like my children, and in order to take them to the world the way that they and the fans deserved, I had to be right there in the faces of the people who make big things happen. And that assumption was correct. After 9 years in Los Angeles, I've been in the label offices of Interscope, Universal, Atlantic, in the iconic Capitol Records building in Hollywood, and I've had my music and my project, The Joker's Legacy, shopped to all of those labels and directly to major tastemakers like Kanye West. All, though, to no avail. It was like no one could see the potential. No one could get their heads around my work. No one could see how my brand of expansive, colorful, and complex music would work on the contemporary landscape. It just didn't fit in. And that, my friends, was the problem. In the age of TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram fame, everyone in the music industry was just too scared to take chances. They were just waiting to see what popped in the algorithms and just throwing money at viral fan bases to sell records fast and get streams that would make a quick buck, and then move right on to the next noisy social media fad they could throw money at. I discovered the entire music industry that used to be so avant-garde and exciting had wilted into a sad brood of insecure corporate cowardice. With the disruptive innovation of the internet and all the profits from physical CD sales vanishing before their eyes, the old guard became so afraid to lose money that they compromised everything that made them great to make sure that they stayed in the black. Investing in talent and innovation was just not an option for them anymore. What used to be exciting about music, finding the new hot band or rapper or singer, that innovative angle to creativity you've never heard of before, and then diving headfirst into it, was replaced by an endless sea of homogenized redundancy. By 2020, I had faced rejection after rejection and watched every single plan I made to elevate my situation crumble before my eyes. I started feeling myself fading into the ever-so-common motif of the starving artist, and watching all the people around me and even some of my day-one fans begin to lose faith in me. Then the pandemic happened, and that took shit to a whole new level of desperate for almost everybody. We were barely making rent, and then my wife's income disappeared because the movie industry shut down due to COVID. I had to do something. So in October of 2020, I went to the studio of my big bro and West Coast gangster rapper Glasses Malone, who'd been helping to shop me, and asked him to think of anyone we hadn't approached yet who would really like my music and would possibly want to work with me. He thought about it for a second and said, "You know Exhibit?" "Of course I do. He was one of my favorite rappers growing up, and I loved Pimp My Ride." "Yeah, I think he would fuck with you, and he thinks outside the box." So 2 weeks later, we're sitting in Exhibit Studio in the San Fernando Valley with platinum plaques on the walls and playing my music on the mains for one of my childhood heroes. It was surreal. So after X listened to No Longer Useful and a handful of other Joker tracks, he told me he loved my voice, lyrics, musicality, and production. And then he asked me, "Did you do all this production and mixing yourself? Do you use live instruments? Can you play drums and rap at the same time?" Of course, the answer to all these questions was yes. He then said, "You know what? You need to start a band. If you've been marketing yourself as a rapper, you're just playing to the wrong crowd. This is big music. A whole different demographic comes to see a band rather than a rapper. Plus, we haven't had a major rap rock pop band on the scene since Linkin Park. That lane is wide open in the current music world. Just take what you're already doing and just do it as a band rather than a solo artist, and you'll pack stadiums." He then suggested I name my band JESTER, after I used that word about 10 times when explaining that my character, the Joker, wasn't a comic book villain, but rather a medieval jester. And that was it. Then we just left. At the time, I was actually disappointed because part of me hoped deep down that Exhibit would be the one to take me under his wing and finally give me some help getting my career and my big vision off the ground. But instead, he just gave me a wise word and his phone number, telling me to keep him posted on my progress. You know, sometimes in life, what we don't want to hear is actually what we need to hear. And this is definitely one of those cases. X wasn't going to chaperone my career personally, but in hindsight, this was the single most significant piece of advice I'd ever gotten from anyone in the music industry after almost 20 years of grinding my ass off. So after about 2 to 3 weeks of feeling dejected again, and after Glasses telling me repeatedly that I should listen to X, I shook it off and I went to work building the band JESTER. I'd already been working with a handful of monster musicians in the LA scene, and I'd also met some incredible vocalists through Craigslist from ads I'd posted looking for singers. But I always just thought of them as friends and paid studio musicians rather than bandmates. What happened, though, when I started thinking of them as band members was nothing short of magical. It was like the floodgates opened up and the universe began pouring unbelievably talented singers and musicians right into my lap. But they weren't just talented. These were beautiful souls with impeccable character. For example, the very day Glasses set up the meeting with X, as I was driving home, I got a Craigslist response email from Luna Ashari. She was a 31-year-old French, Italian, and Spanish singer who spoke 7 languages, played a dozen or more instruments, and had the voice of an angel, with a passion and intensity that dripped off every word or note that she played or sang. I listened on the way home to her live cover of A Perfect Circle's 3 Libras. Luna straight blew me away. And as she sang that haunting outro coda, you don't see me, over and over again, I felt my heart bleed and cry out to God, because that's exactly how I felt in that moment. Unseen, uncared for, refusing to compromise on my convictions, and suffering endlessly for it. In retrospect, Luna's amazing voice was the laughably ironic divine answer to that dark feeling of abandonment that was sitting on my soul. Luna is now one of JESTER's anchor members and the wild card of the group, and also one of my closest personal friends. But she was only one of many who came to me after that moment. Patty Lynn, Shauna Medina, Zara Mahler, Brian Regalado, Val Vagoda, RJ Root, Glenn Turner, Anastasia Maliatis, Dan Antunovich, and more fell into my lap over the course of the next few months. Each of these people is just a superhuman musician, but with an ironclad resolve and a heart of pure gold. All of them battle-hardened after decades of grinding in the music industry, and not one of them has backed off, relented, or given up hope. They were fearless like me. They were the miraculous response to my feeling so unseen and forgotten. During the assembly of the band, though, the rest of my world collapsed. My marriage of 9 years fell apart. My landlord of 8 years evicted me. My 4-year-old cousin from Arizona drowned just days before I was supposed to take her to Disneyland. And a friend of mine was murdered a week later. It was the worst year of my life. But what I realized in 2021 was the people who left me were never meant to stay with me. And the ones who replaced them were better than I could have ever imagined. The JESTERs quickly became my new family. By the end of that year, through the grace of God, I was able to secure a new place to live, rebuild my studio, and I had 15 or so new JESTER songs in my holster. I'd done photo shoots, graphics, dialed in a logo and a look, developed merchandise and clothing lines for each JESTER member, and began compiling a pitch package for the band to give to Glasses Malone for him to shop. He was certain that with the new brand, he could secure a record deal or attract a major name to back the project. And so he went to work shopping it to his contacts. And then it happened. Lo and behold, finally we got an offer for a record deal for $300,000. Now, I know that may seem like a lot of money to some of you hearing this, but on a scale of how the mainstream music industry works, $300,000 for a deal, especially for a project as ambitious and as large scale as JESTER, is nothing. To give you an idea of what I mean, one album deal for a B-list artist on an independent label such as Strange Music may have a total budget of like $250,000. That's for a minor artist on a relatively small label. The budget for major bands such as Coldplay, Imagine Dragons, or the Red Hot Chili Peppers can easily go into the tens of millions of dollars. It can cost over $1 million just to put out one single on the radio nationwide. Now, I wasn't expecting someone to see JESTER as on par with major legacy bands like the ones I just named, but I was at least expecting someone to see the potential of the world that JESTER could create and to provide us enough to actually build it right. $300,000 for a band of 12 to 15 people was almost worse than nothing, because you only get one chance to make a first impression. Coming out the gate with the shoestring budget with something like JESTER would highly likely run the risk of being corny and would actually hurt the brand overall. Not to mention, it wouldn't even cover our bills while we do the work. It was a giant, ironic, paradoxical slap in the face. All my life I wanted a record deal, and when I finally got the offer of one with the biggest, baddest idea I've ever had, it was nowhere near enough. Glasses continued shopping the band and continued getting subpar offers and being met with skepticism. As it turns out, in my fixation on having finally found my angle with JESTER, I overlooked the fact that what I had learned about the modern music industry was still proving to be correct. They just didn't see it. It was the same old rejection all over again. It was then that I had an epiphany, which was this: I don't need to be the one getting the checks from the record deal. I should be the one signing the checks. I had already been developing and refining talent for years with my artist development company, JLS A&R, and I had already helped create and release dozens of projects for artists and bands over my years of being a producer, videographer, artist consultant, and mixing engineer. And from my time in the underground, I'd also become an excellent brander, both for myself as the Joker and for tons of other artists in the scene. I had all the tools. Why not just be the change that I wanted to see in the world? Fuck it. So I then created Fearless Visionary Entertainment as my umbrella brand for my solo career, the JESTER project, and for any other artist I would sign and develop going into the future. I once heard someone say, talent is hitting the target that others can't hit. Genius is hitting the target that others can't see. Well, the internet made it to where everyone had to be their own record label. I always thought, why doesn't someone just take it back to how it used to be? Give the artist the freedom and resources to create, to maximize their creative output. Give a different department the job of marketing and selling. The way it is now, every artist has to do everything for themselves, and everything suffers. Why the heck doesn't somebody fix that? Maybe because it was a target that others couldn't see. That's why I called my company Fearless Visionary. You have to be a visionary to see the target, and you have to be fearless to actually try to hit it and muscle that vision into reality. I was already a fearless visionary, and that ethos was going to be ensconced in my company's very name. After registering my S-Corp, I then went to work looking for investors in my company, rather than looking for a record deal for my band, as it made more sense. Offering shares of Fearless Visionary meant investors could own a piece of both JESTER and any other artist we ever signed, which is much more attractive than that of one band or a single album. And I was able to find a few investors for small percentages of my company, which was great and exciting, but it was still nowhere near enough. Something was still missing. Fast forward 1 year. December 2022, my latest Joker album, Coming Home, was shipping after fans had been waiting a very long time. Hundreds of pre-orders were finally getting fulfilled with the help of my new business partner, Val Vigoda, and it was a huge weight off my chest. I had moved, my new studio was built, my band was developed, and I had a clear vision of who I was supposed to be with my new company. The year had been a rough one, but it was much better than the last, and it was ending on a strong note with the pocket of rare relative stability. So on one day in the middle of the month, I was in a good mood, and I invited two of my band members, Luna Ashari and the master opera singer, Anastasia Maliadis, out for a bike ride on the beach. Luna had just come through a painful divorce like me, and was finally adjusting to life on her own. Anastasia had just recovered from a debilitating back surgery that had plagued her for almost 3 years and was finally feeling like herself again. So we were all in good spirits. It was a beautiful, warm December day in Southern California, and Luna knew the owner of an amazing, authentic Italian restaurant in Marina del Rey, overlooking the harbor. So after a bike ride along the beach, we found ourselves on an outdoor patio, having wine and delicious Italian food as we watched all the sailboats and luxury yachts bobbing and swaying gently in the breeze. It was magical. Now, the unique thing about JESTER up to this point is it was really less like a group of friends who did music together, and more like a bicycle wheel, and that I had cultivated relationships with all the members individually. So I was like the hub, and many of the spokes had never met each other. So this was actually the first time that Luna and Anastasia had ever spent any time together at all, even though I've known them both for years. As they both talked, all I could think about was how freaking unique and special they both were. Luna with her chaotic upbringing in Italy and France, and Anastasia with her traditional Greek upbringing in Chicago. They each told incredible stories of music, adventures, survival, pain, triumphs, and lessons. And as I listened, the only thing running through my mind was, who are these people? And how did I get so lucky? This made me think of everything that had to transpire for me to be in that exact place and at that exact time to meet them both. And now to have them both be such major parts of my life. It seriously seemed like something or someone in a high place was up to something and pulling the strings. Anyways, this was all swirling in my head on our ride back while I watched these two dead serious, no fucking joke, classically trained 30-something musical monsters pedal by me on beach cruisers like two little giddy schoolgirls with big dumb smiles on their faces. That was it. I'd finally figured it out. It all clicked into place in my mind like giant cosmic tumblers unlocking the universe of possibilities. It was our stories. Think of your favorite song from your favorite artist or band. Why do you love it? What were you doing when you first heard it? Did you just marry the love of your life and that song became a staple of your relationship? Or did you just go through a painful breakup and that song helped you process that pain? Were you a teenager taking your first road trip with your buddies? Or were you locked away in a room and that song helped you survive the dark, lonely nights of an abusive childhood? What I'm getting at is, songs become our favorites not simply because of the sound of the music or the voices singing them, but more so because of what was happening in our lives when we discovered them, when they first hit us right in the soul and changed us for the better forever. Songs are the soundtrack to the movies of our lives. The stories we live and the music that colors them are one and the same, unified in a mysterious, sacred, and magical way that makes life so much more vibrant, and for some, like me and many of the jesters, makes it actually worth living. This is why many songs can sit in obscurity until they're plucked out of the void by a music supervisor and placed in a film or TV series, and only then do they find and connect with the massive audience the artist originally intended. This was the ultimate light bulb moment for me. Instead of playing the same old game and trying to launch Jester with its music, Jester would be launched with its stories. Jester would be launched with a live-action TV series on a major streaming platform, and its plotline would be the dramatic retelling of my time in the underground rap world, the tension I lived in with my musical mind in the clouds, and then the creation of the band as a response to my repeated rejection in the music industry. The show would open with Jester playing to huge stadium crowds, giving the larger-than-life Jester productions a proper home, and then filling in the backstory of how those songs came to be, along with exploring the elaborate character vignettes of each of the Jesters and their backstories. This both introduces the band on a massive platform, validating it immediately with cutting-edge visual production value, and also gives a real, legitimate emotional context to the songs, as well as giving Fearless Visionary a massive platform on which to release the music of all of its artists going into the future. With Jester as a streaming series, I could launch the band with the budget it deserves, and at the same time completely circumvent the legacy music industry and all of its predictably small thinking. Jester as a streaming series had the potential to change everything. Little did I know at the time, but that was only the beginning. After I figured out the Jester angle, more shows were developed, then movies, then video games. It was a deluge of inspiration that put all the focus back on my media company. By New Year's of 2024, the meeting I had with Glasses was not about Jester, but about Fearless Visionary Entertainment, where the best of the best in the world come to be recognized, empowered, and unleashed. By February, I was able to attract investors. The money comes when you make it about people, the best people. Over the next year, I used that money to take care of the people around me. The real true creatives with huge hearts, the abandoned monsters who this bullshit industry took for granted and abused just like it did to me. I also used all my experience and wisdom from the industry to develop a brand new business model, an entirely new way of doing things that takes everything we know about human psychology and the entertainment industry and reimagines it for the 21st century. See, I've been drugged through the mud a million times since I was born. But the one thing that's different about me, I made up my mind a long time ago. I'm never going to let this bullshit change me. I have no price, and now I have an extensive public track record that'll back that up. Nobody can deny it. See, I changed my prayers a few years ago. I stopped asking God to make my dreams come true, and instead, to put me in a position to make everyone else's dreams come true. And this was his answer. See, I'm the CEO and frontman, but Fearless, Jester, it's not about me. My whole music career was just a vehicle to open my eyes and fully digest the magnitude of how truly broken the entire entertainment establishment is. I just had to feel the pain more than anybody, so I'd want to fix it more than anybody. I'm gonna stand there in front of that evil Leviathan that crushes dreams, breaks minds, and destroys art, and say, fuck you. I'm the Walt Disney of dope shit. And the future is fearless.
Well, it's 'cause I'm fearless.
In a world of heartless commercialism, where clickbait and flash pan popularity reigned supreme. The time-honored ethos of dedication and authenticity stand like ancient megaliths, looking down on a playground of impulsive indulgence. In this world, there is one man standing unafraid before a looming tidal wave of celebrated mediocrity. One man who has put himself to the hazard in the name of truth time and time again, and so now wears his scars with an ironclad determination. This man, once alone, is now backed by an army of musicians, dancers, actors, and entertainers with equal resolve to strike back against the great cheapening of all they once held so dear. They are committed, they are steadfast, they are fearless. Now, with a great global war against true creativity well underway, Ethan, Jester, and the fearless visionaries are set to take their rightful place on the front lines and show the world a choice it was denied in art and entertainment, with uncompromising excellence and authenticity, catering to no one but captivating everyone. They do not have a price. They will not concede. They are unapologetically unique and equally courageous. As many hang their heads in defeat, the fearless visionaries have now come to remind everyone that the war has only just begun. Fearless Visionary Entertainment is here.